In this video, we're going to look at something called depreciation on owning a car. So depreciation is the reduction in value of an asset, and in this case, we're looking at cars, because of the wear and tear that is on a car or because of the time that's gone by while the car has been around. So businesses and individual consumers care about depreciation, but they care about them for different purposes. A business will calculate depreciation at the time of the purchase to expense the usage of an asset, or this car, and reduce their net income. For an individual consumer, they want to calculate their depreciation so they can estimate how much it costs to use their car on an annual basis. Now, there's actually three methods for calculating depreciation for businesses. The first method is called straight line method, and that would be where you reduce the value of the car evenly by year over a specified period of time. So you would estimate how long you'd have the vehicle, you would estimate what its salvage value is at the end of life, which means how much could I sell this vehicle for, and then you would determine how much you used up of the vehicle by dividing that amount evenly over the number of years you anticipate having the vehicle. Another method is double declining balance. And with this method, what you're doing is you're trying to take more depreciation at the beginning of the life of that car than at the end. So you don't quite take a double amount. There's like a more involved calculation, but basically you're doubling the rate of the depreciation that you have on this vehicle, and you're reducing the value of the vehicle until you get to the salvage value. So eventually you stop depreciating it once you determine the value of it is the price that you can sell it for. And then probably a most common way to depreciate a vehicle is to base it off of usage. So you would determine how many miles you plan to use this car for, and then you would determine how much the car is worth for the number of miles you'll be using it, and then you would divide that amount by the number of miles, and every time you drove it a certain number of miles, you would depreciate the car that way. Now, for individuals, we are actually going to be looking at two different formulas when we calculate depreciation. So the first thing we want to look at is our average annual rate. And this is somewhat flexible because you're looking at it based off of the amount of depreciation you have versus the number of years you own it. So let's say that you calculated this average annual rate in year 3. Well, by the time you get to year 5, you could recalculate this rate, and it will change a little bit because you're calculating it at one point in time at 3 years, and then you could calculate it again at another point in time in 5 years. But the point is, when you're doing your analysis, if you're trying to say how much does this vehicle cost me per year, you're saying how much has it cost me so far per year. So that would be your average annual rate, and that says how much is being used up each year that you've owned the car on average. The other calculation we'll look at is the rate of depreciation. So to calculate the rate of depreciation, you're going to take that average annual depreciation that you calculated up here, and you're going to divide that by the original cost. And what that does for you is it tells you what percentage of your vehicle gets used up year to year. Now, I did find a chart online that actually shows what value your car holds based off of how old it is. So if your car is only a year old, your car is still worth 81% of the original value. So it loses 19% in that first year. But after 2 years, your car goes down to being worth 69% of the original value. And what that means is if I take 100% minus 69%, that means I used up 31% of the value. Now you'll see the first 2 years it uses up the most value. By the time you get to year 3, you're still holding 58% of the original value. By year 4, you're holding 49% of that original value, and by year 5, you're holding 40% of that original value. And so if I were to calculate and say, let's say I bought a car for $10,000 brand new, and I wanted to say, what is my car going to be worth in 5 years? I would take that $10,000, multiply it by 40%. That means that my car is worth $4,000 in 5 years. Now, the older your car gets, the less value you have. Some sites might say 10 years or older, that it's not worth anything at all, but that's not quite true. it's just worth barely anything at all. For example, I have a truck that's 20 years old, and if I looked online to sell it, I could probably get $1,000. So it's not worth nothing. It's worth something, but it's not worth anything near what that truck was brand new, because the truck brand new would have been $35,000. Now I'm only getting $1,000. It has barely any value. So in this chapter, we only have one. Now let's look at our practice problem. We have Matt Miller paid $22,500 for a vehicle 4 years ago. The vehicle is worth $16,500 today. What is the average annual depreciation, and what is the rate of depreciation? So the first thing we're going to look at is we're going to use our formula here, average annual rate, and it says it's the total amount of depreciation divided by the years owned. Well, in order to figure out how much has been depreciated on this car, I need to take the price that Matt paid, and I need to subtract off what the car is worth today. And when I do that, the car is now worth $6,000. That tells me what my total amount of depreciation is. I can divide that now by 4, and I really like to divide down. So to do that, I'm just going to put it kind of upside down here, and I'm going to divide by 4. And when I do, that gives me $1,500 per year. That means I used up $1,500 per year if I look at an average of the 4 years I've owned it. Now the next question says, what is the rate of depreciation? Well, the rate of depreciation is your average annual depreciation, and you're going to divide that by the original cost. So the average annual depreciation I have is $1,500. That's what I calculated, kind of like, right here. The original cost that Matt paid is $22,500. And if I were to calculate that out, that's going to give me the decimal 0.06667. And when I'm looking at this, it says it's going to want the rate in a percentage. So this is in decimal format. I want to put this in a percentage format. So I'm going to multiply this by 100, and that's going to equal 6.67%.